40%. So
right.
the gains are a lot larger abroad. So obviously, if anybody moved, into the foreign markets and out of the U.S. markets, since maybe October, November, December, January, February, that time frame, they're in much, much better shape than people who are in the U.S. And I think that's going to continue. I think 2008, 2008 was the only year, I think, in the last 8 or 9 years that you were better off being in U.S. stocks than foreign stocks. It was the only year. And, of course, a lot of people, when they were criticizing me, were talking about how terrible 2008 was and saying this proves that your investment thesis is wrong. Well, what about 2000 through 2007? What about those 8 years? You're just going to discount those. And, of course, 2009 is already getting off to be another great year. So I think 2008 was the aberration. I think we can have another 8, 10 years where foreign stocks do substantially better than U.S. stocks.
Well, I agree with you. And my question is this. I understand that there's a lot of factors that affect the value of a currency. I understand that just looking at the dollar specifically, we've had an extreme slowdown in the velocity of money based on what's happened in the market with this exogenous shock. And, I understand that there's a huge pent-up supply overseas that's being hoarded and eventually will come back to our shores based on, their lack of demand for the currency. But for the time being, just focused on supply, the biggest argument against your point here in the short term is that there's such a massive quantity of dollars just around the globe today, and a tremendous amount of those dollars are diminishing based on what's happening with the defaults, based on, what's happening with the bankruptcies, based on happening with all the debt gone bad. And the money supply the new money thus far that's been created by the Fed is not even coming close to offsetting that huge amount of money that's diminished right now.
I've heard that argument, but think about it in this way. To say that we can print money simply because loans have gone bad and that it's not inflationary, if that were really the case, then what countries could do, everybody can get a loan. There would be no lending standards. People would just lend money to anybody. And any time a loan went bad, the government would just print the money and give it to the lender and say, here you go. If somebody borrows money and doesn't pay it back, that's a real loss. Wealth has been destroyed. You can't simply paper it over. And
right.
and so just because we've had a lot of bad debts doesn't mean we can print money and it's not going to have an inflationary consequence. It does. And a lot of it is going to be with a pickup in the velocity of that money. People aren't going to be willing to hold that money. Our foreign creditors were willing to hold on to the money. So even if there's less dollars in circulation, but people don't want them, right? Then the dollar collapses. As long as there's demand. There's two sides of the equation. There's the money supply and there's the money demand. And then there's also the goods available for sale. If we're not producing as much stuff, even if there's fewer dollars, those dollars have less value because there's less things to buy.
Okay.
I don't. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of bad debts and failed firms in countries like Zimbabwe, but it doesn't mean that if they're cranking up the printing presses that prices aren't going to rise. And I think it's the same. It's the same people. That's the only argument that I've heard against kind of your thesis, which is just the actual. Because when you say the definition of inflation is an increase in the money supply, relative to goods and services, technically for the time being in this very short-term period of time before the Fed gets crazy, you could say technically we are in a deflation and that the total money supply is shrinking. Well, I think you get deflation if you price goods in dollars. But if you look at CPI, the CPI is still rising. It's not falling. But yes, There are some forces that are exerting downward pressure on prices, despite the fact that the government is creating a lot of money. And yes, part of the money supply is credit. And yes, credit is contracting in some areas, but it's blowing through the roof in others. Sure, private individuals are borrowing less, but look at how much more the government itself is borrowing. The government is increasing its spending dramatically. So even though American citizens might be spending less on their own, their government is certainly spending more. Anyway, I got to hop. I realize I got less than 15 minutes left, and there's 4 calls on the board.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for the call. Let's take nobody else call. I'll try to get the last 4 callers in, or 3. Let me take Dan in California.
Hi, Peter. This is Dan in California. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry to keep you on hold so long, Dan. What's your question?
Oh, that's okay, quite all right. I just wanted to mention my grandmother was a milliner. She owned a hat shop. So you mentioned earlier that we used to make things. That's indeed what she did. She made an okay living at it. I also
although one of the reasons we probably don't make that many hats is that nobody wears them anymore.
Yeah, that's true enough. The style has certainly changed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen the Zimbabwe tube. It's called Bread for Gold. It's about in Zimbabwe they don't accept the currency anymore. These people have to go out and physically mine gold in streams to get 1/10 of a gram of gold to pay for bread. It's a horrific existence over there.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
that's why we should require all of our politicians to spend maybe a week or two living in Zimbabwe so they understand what inflation is and the consequences before they vote for all these bills.
Yeah,
maybe we should make all the Federal Reserve live over there for a while.
Absolutely. And you said earlier that your FICO score was in the 600s, which is you make an order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude more money than I do. I guarantee it. My FICO score is 814, and I only have one credit card. That's probably the reason why. But
yeah, I mean, and I have a lot of credit cards, but I only use one. But I have a number of store cards because of the discounts.
Yeah,
and I pay my Visa in full all the time. I have a American Express as well, but a business card. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. And they'll say, well, you don't have a good credit history. I go, well, I'm 46 years old. I've paid back every dime I've ever borrowed. I mean, I used to, when I was younger, I had a couple of car loans when I had a car, but I no longer borrow money to buy cars. I did buy a commercial property once, and I sold it, and I paid off the loan. So I've never been late. I think I actually had one late pay. I owed like $100 or $120 to a doctor. I didn't know I owed it, and so it went into collection. And then as soon as I found out that I never paid the bill, I sent him a check. But it wasn't because I didn't pay it. I just didn't even know I owed it.
Yeah, the whole system doesn't make any sense. It's irrational for the FICO score. But I have a question for you. Just I know you don't have much time left, but in March of 2008, the dollar bottomed around 70.70. I'm looking at a chart of it right now, and just recently, last month in March, it topped at 89.62. So it strengthened dramatically. At the same time, the Fed has been printing money tremendously. And my question is this: do you think that what's more important for the dollar, its relative strength, is global psychology rather than just the idea?
Again, what happened is we increased the supply of dollars, but the demand for dollars increased more, this rush for liquidity. One of the reasons that we have not felt the economic crisis more severely is because we have had the benefit of the strength of the dollar. Money has flowed into this country. Money has flown into our debt. That's the reason the government has been able to bail people out. That's how come we've been able to pay for the stimulus packages, because we've been able to get that cash. But that is going to turn around. There's no question that that's going to turn around. And when the dollar starts to fall again, then the crisis is going to move into a new gear, because now we're going to start to see rising consumer prices. We're going to start to see long-term interest rates backing up, and that's only going to compound the problem because we have even more debt now, and it's going to be more expensive to service it, and it's going to be more expensive to buy stuff. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the call. Sorry to be so rushed, but I want to get to the last couple of callers. Feel free to call back next time. Next caller is Brent in Oregon. Brent, you there?
Hello. This is Brent in Portland.
Yeah, go ahead, Brent. You're on the air.
Yeah, Peter, I'm one of your clients. I've got a Euro-Pacific portfolio, and of course, the prices of the stocks went down quite a bit this last year, but I can attest the dividend payments were still there, and I invested more money in December, and I can say the investments from that point forward have increased dramatically. So I'm happy with the way things are going. My question has to do with a little bit different aspect of my portfolio than stocks, though. I like to keep a little bit of money in fixed income, and I am a thorough believer that the dollar, as you were saying, is going to really start to decline. And I was curious about your current view of the Merck Hard Currency Fund and the newer one that they have out, the Merck Asian Currency Fund.
Yeah, we still buy both of those funds. They both went down in 2008 as the dollar went up. Obviously, they didn't go down as much as many of the stocks that we bought because there was no stock component. It's simply a currency. It's simply an exchange rate. And to the extent that you want to keep cash liquid, you don't want to invest it. You don't want to assume stock market risk, but you don't want dollar risk. If you want to, then they're very good vehicles because they're no load funds, so there's no commission to buy and sell, so you can park your money there for as short a period or as long a period as you want. But at least if the dollar crashes while the money is there,